After completing this lesson, you will be able to describe three important practices which can educate and empower new parents to exclusively provide their own milk in the first 100 hours. So, in the last lesson, we were talking about short term outcomes. In this one, we're going to talk about the actual techniques and processes that we should be ensuring that they're hearing about before they have a baby in their arms. And hopefully, we have these opportunities to provide this information prenatally, whether that's through social media, through actual courses and classes, or through consultation prenatally. And this information then can feel familiar to parents when they actually have a baby, get to the hospital, and start hearing things about, oh, we have to count the diapers and we have to look for what's, changing with how your baby's asking to be fed. So let's talk about these actual processes. We want to make sure that people are familiar with the concept that newborns breastfeed very frequently, that they should be breastfed early, that they should be latching well every single time they're feeding, and that when they are not feeding, the best place for them to be, the ideal place for them to be, is going to be skin to skin. Next, we want to be sure that they are familiar with the concept that in order to know their baby is getting milk and doing well, they're going to be counting diapers. They're going to be looking at what's in their baby's diaper, that their baby is going to have just a few diapers in these first 100 hours. It's something that they really should be familiar with because many people are thinking about babies and diapers in terms of how many diapers they go through, right? It's a big joke. It's like a cultural thing about, you need to have so many diapers on hand. So they're a little surprised when they have a newborn who only wets one diaper in 24 hours. So it really does help to talk through these things early and explain why does a newborn have only one wet diaper in the first 24 hours. That leads into great conversation about how much colostrum they're really taking in, how much they actually need, and why they're not going to have lots and lots of really wet diapers for a couple of days until they are making lots and lots of milk and the baby's taking it in. We also want to be really clear about how newborns sleep because it's important for parents to expect that their baby is going to wake frequently. If that's not what they're expecting, then a baby who doesn't sleep for hours and hours on end feels like a problem. So let's be honest with them about what newborn sleep looks like and how short their sleep cycles really are. We don't want to be thinking about sleep training stuff. We don't want to be thinking about all these weird concepts of how babies sleep when we're just looking at a newborn. We really want people to understand why newborns sleep the way that they do, how they connect those shorter sleep cycles, and how feeding fits into that. And that feeding isn't the only thing babies do other than sleeping, so that they're not surprised by what their baby is expecting from them. And then, of course, we're talking about how making milk works. And this is a common thing that lots of people already have incorporated in their prenatal education, that how milk is already being made during pregnancy, how that colostrum is being suppressed. And then later, after the baby is born, the hormones that are suppressing it are going away so that milk production can increase. The breasts will feel different as that increase starts to happen, but it's not automatic. It doesn't happen immediately just because the baby was born. And we don't see copious milk until an average of 48 to 72 hours after the baby was born. But that by 100 hours, they should be expecting to see plenty of milk coming out, plenty of milk going into the baby, and seeing those changes in what the diaper outcomes are looking like. Now, as we're talking to people about exclusive breastfeeding, we want to remember for ourselves the two things can be true. Exclusive breastfeeding is indeed optimal, scientifically, physiologically for babies. Whenever possible, exclusive breastfeeding is the optimal way to feed a newborn. We don't want to forget to talk about this. We don't want to leave this out of the conversation and get caught up in other messaging. But it's also true that all breastfeeding and human milk are beneficial and important. So we don't want to forget to mention that when things get tricky and complicated. So, what happens sometimes is that we lose sight of what we are actually doing when we're trying to teach people. We have these desires to be sympathetic and empathetic and to protect people's feelings, but it is our role and responsibility in a way that it is really not anyone else's role and responsibility to make sure that people understand that exclusive breastfeeding really is optimal. And then later on, should they have to use other products and tools and processes to feed their baby, we can be the people that remind them that all the breastfeeding that they are doing or did before, and all the human milk that they fed their baby or are still feeding their baby is still important so that they can make choices that help them to continue that. We could make a bigger impact when we remember both of these things and we really include them in all the opportunities we have to talk to parents. So when they get to us right after the hospital experience and they're already out of that exclusive breastfeeding plan, this is where it really comes in handy to be an expert in the first 100 hours. How can we help people see how they can get back into exclusive human milk feeding and exclusive breastfeeding? How can we help them find the right mixed feeding plan where they're doing some breastfeeding and some expressing milk, or some breastfeeding and some formula feeding? If that's what they want to continue to do, how do we help them find that balance? Basically, how are we going to help them feel that they are in control if they are no longer exclusively breastfeeding or exclusively human milk feeding? We want people to feel like they control what happens next in their infant feeding journey. So, if exclusive breastfeeding at the breast is not realistic for somebody based on things that have happened or the choices that they have in front of them, it's not the same as saying that breastfeeding is not possible at all. So we want to make sure that they understand that they can still do just some of their feeding at the breast. They could pump exclusively. They could do some pumping and some breastfeeding. They could do occasional breastfeeding and also express milk. They could do occasional breastfeeding, some pumping, and some formula feeding. All of these things are possible. These are a lot of different plans that people can end up in. And what we teach them in the first 100 hours is an important part of helping them see what those plans would actually look like in real life, because then they'll have knowledge about each thing. So, this is why we always support them to know how to continue their milk production, starting from the very beginning. We always remind them that breastfeeding can still be part of their plan, no matter what happens or what choices they make. And we always ask them what will actually work for you. In addition to knowing what their goals are and checking in with them about their goals frequently, we need to ask if the plans and the suggestions that we're making are going to work for them. Is this practical for you? So that it's a realistic plan. We begin with the process of skin to skin, the natural habitat for the newborn baby, which provides them, and when I say them, I mean the mother baby dyad, both human beings, with regulation after the process of labor and childbirth, with warmth, metabolism normalizes, they both can rest, and it helps to set their circadian rhythms and their clocks. Now, if skin to skin is not being performed on the birth mother, all of these things can still happen for the baby. So it's really, really important that people understand that skin to skin is where a newborn should be, because they are going to get all these things out of it. And all the time that that baby is able to spend on their birth mother doing skin to skin, it's also going to have these important health outcomes for her as well. So skin to skin is where babies should be, not just for the first hour after they're born, but most of the time, almost all of the time that it's practical. When we talk about this much earlier than right after the baby's born, it makes more sense to people and they start to envision this is what the first few days are going to be like. It's not going to be jumping up and down out of bed and doing things in the hospital. It's not going to be go home with my baby when they're 48 hours old and vacuum the living room. It's going to be skin to skin in the hospital. It's going to be skin to skin when I get home. We want people to understand how milk production works. We want them to know about how milk production changes over time, and specifically how milk production is going to come out in, or is going to be happening in the first 100 hours. So we've got milk production happening in the third trimester, and it's being downregulated and suppressed by the hormone progesterone. When the placenta is born, progesterone levels begin to drop, and this is what actually stops the suppression of milk production and instigates that changeover from colostrum to mature milk. It's a very gradual process, and it's not precisely predictable in terms of time. What we do know is that it generally happens 48 to 72 hours after the birth of the placenta. This is when most mothers begin to see copious milk and feel significant changes in their breasts. The rhythm of the routine of early breastfeeding is a really important thing. If we can help new parents, expectant parents, picture what this is going to be like, it's not going to seem so foreign to them. Their baby will be feeding right away. Their baby will be feeding frequently. Early, frequent feeds with minimal interruptions, minimal interference with their feeding patterns. This is what promotes and supports normal milk production right now and in the long term. So providing them with this sense that there is a rhythm to it, but it's not the rhythm that they're expecting. They're expecting something that's very spaced out in intervals of a certain number of hours in between feedings, or that feedings always take a certain amount of time. The rhythm that they want to picture, the rhythm that we want them to envision, is that the baby will be skin to skin, begin to show hunger cues, move to the breast, feed for as long as they want, and then in between, they will both rest and sleep. Rest being time when they are calm and not needing anything, not asking for anything, as well as sleep. And then the next phase will again begin with skin to skin, baby cueing to go to the breast, going to the breast, and then being done so that they can rest or sleep. That is the rhythm. The rhythm is not, I look at the clock. If it's time to feed, I bring the baby to the breast, feed them for a certain number of time, and then I put them down. That rhythm will not help to support milk production. It will not help the baby to get enough milk. So this is an important difference that we really want to distinguish for people as early and often as we can. And we want them to know that early feeding is, or, feeding in the first 100 hours, it's early and frequent. One of the reasons for this, we want them to see and understand and anticipate that this is a day and night thing. This is throughout the entire 24-hour cycle, because the hormones that are working to support milk production and to support babies to grow and develop are occurring and are being produced and are rising and falling throughout the 24-hour cycle. Prolactin levels vary. They go up and down during the day and night. They don't go away. Breastfeeding doesn't become less important during the night. In fact, it becomes more important during the night. Prolactin levels tend to be highest during the night. And prolactin is the milk-making hormone. It's part of an entire system of hormones that promote milk production, but prolactin is a very important hormone in milk production. Frequent stimulation, frequent emptying of the breast. We say emptying, even though it's not true emptying. Every time milk is being drawn out of the breast, that helps prolactin levels to rise. And then if milk stays in the breast and is not being removed frequently, prolactin levels begin to fall. So we need people to understand that these processes are not visible on the outside, but the practices we know that support things to happen normally include this early and frequent feeding and making sure that we're expressing milk as often as we can if the baby is not able to feed at the breast and take the milk out themselves. It's a really important part of milk production that when everything's going great, it works behind the scenes. It's no big deal. No one ever thinks about it. But when we start to see any issues, that's when we want to explore what is going on once it becomes dark, what is going on when things change. If they're still in the hospital, what is going on the night shift, what is interfering with regular milk expression or milk leaving the breast. We want people to understand that prolactin is being stimulated to rise by milk coming out of the breast, but it's being asked to go down if we're not taking milk out. It's part of the process that the body has to suppress milk production overall if breastfeeding is actually not happening. Optimizing latch early and often. So we can teach about this prenatally, we can talk about it, we can provide information, and we can support it every single chance that we have once the baby is born, especially in the first 100 hours. What happens when we support people is that they learn more and more and more skills and techniques so that for those times when no one else is around to help them with latching, they know what to do to make it better. They know how to try to fix it. We can help them to optimize in a variety of ways. We want them to get hands-on help whenever they can from somebody who knows how to do this. We want them to have access to videos that show them what latch looks like. We want to verbally talk them through it as often as we possibly can so that they, whatever words matter to them, whatever phrases help them, are all in their memory. And ideally, we want them to see other people breastfeeding. This can be really useful as something that happens when they attend peer breastfeeding support groups in advance of giving birth. When they see other people breastfeed, it begins to dawn on them what it's going to be like. There's nothing like talking to somebody in the hospital who's just had a baby who didn't really ever think about the fact that they were going to have to expose their breast or they might have to hold it, they might have to touch it, because that can take some mental preparation for people. So when they see breastfeeding through videos, through peer modeling, it helps them to picture what it might be like for them. We definitely want to ensure we know what optimal latch looks like, feels like, and what the outcomes are going to be. So we know that mothers should not be experiencing pain during breastfeeding. Pain is never normal. It's not something to get through or to just grin and bear it. It's very important that they are comfortable. It's also important that they themselves are comfortable when they are feeding so that they can feed the baby for as long as the baby needs to feed. And also important that the baby is comfortable so that they can feed for as long as they need to feed. We know that there should be no nipple damage after a baby is finished feeding. That is also never normal. Nipple damage indicates something is not right with the way the baby is latching or the way the baby is sucking. Sometimes positioning is the reason for, or poor positioning is the reason for early nipple damage. So we want to explore this immediately. We want to resolve it immediately. We want to make sure people know what to do to help themselves get a better latch, and that if they can't get a better latch, they need to ask for help as soon as possible. This is an important message of the first 100 hours. They really need to know that breastfeeding should not hurt and that they should get help as soon as they can if breastfeeding is hurting. What people need to know about making milk is, again, very important that they understand that the frequency of milk removal determines the volume of production. So supporting long-term optimal milk production begins in the first 100 hours with the frequency of milk removal. That is key for people to understand. They also need to know that their body will regulate how much milk they make to the needs of the baby. So it's going to synchronize how much milk it makes to what the baby needs. But the only way that that can happen is if the baby is signaling the body by being fed responsively, or to use another phrase, being fed on demand. When the baby cues hunger, the baby goes to the breast, stays as long as they need to stay, takes out as much milk as they need at that time, and then they are able to get back to the breast as soon as they want to. No limits, no structure to that, no formal times. The only number that really matters is that the baby feeds and milk is being taken out of the breast a total of at least 8 times every 24 hours. Most of the time, it's going to be way more than that, but at least 8 times in 24 hours to support long-term optimal milk production. Often we find that people don't understand that how often they feed is what determines how much milk they make. People have a lot of other concepts in their head of what is important for milk production, but this is the fundamental piece of it. If they intend to breastfeed and they intend to have a full milk production, they need to know that the frequency of milk removal is going to determine milk production. And we want to optimize that right from the beginning, right from the first 100 hours.